All right, let's do it. So it says undefined terms. So usually you take terms and you define them, right? You have definitions for them. But these are three terms that really, they have a description, but they don't really have a definition. And I'll tell you right now, okay, this is how nice I am. This is going to be your first three questions on the first quiz you take. All right, I'll show you in a second. All right, so this is going to be word for word, okay, the first three on there. So, well, actually, I think what I do, I think I just ask you for the three undefined terms. We have three undefined terms, and I just ask you to tell me what the terms are. You don't even have to give a description or anything like that, okay? So there's three undefined terms. And if you look at what we're going to do, it almost looks like they're definitions, but technically they're not. So these are undefined. We can't really define them. But we are going to talk about them. We're going to describe it a little bit. We're just not going to really define it. So the first one is the word point. That's where almost everything we do in geometry starts with a point or a whole bunch of points, but that's the next one. All right. So I'm going to write something, but technically it's not a definition. It's kind of just a description of what a point is. It's, I'll just write it out. It's a dot or location with no length. That's my width. The W and the slash, I just do that as a shortcut. With no length. Sometimes my handwriting on this tablet is pretty bad, so sorry about that. Width or thickness. Or thickness. So you can't measure it. All right? So here's how it's just a description. It's not a technical definition because there is no definition because it's a what kind of a term? It's an undefined term, right? This is just kind of describes what a point is. It really doesn't define it. And it's a subtle difference, but anyway, that's what almost every geometry book I've ever taught out of always starts with this, with a point. How do we show it? How do we label it? So if you were to draw a point, now a point doesn't have any length or any width or any thickness. So technically we can't even draw a point because it doesn't have any width, right? So if I draw something, it's going to have some kind of a width. The smallest dot that you could possibly make has got to have some width. And it even has some thickness. It even comes off the paper a little bit. You know, now this is just digital, so it doesn't really have any thickness, but it does have some width. But that would be a description of a point. It just shows where a point's located. The dot itself is not the point. It just shows where the point's located. It's kind of weird, all right? But a point is like just anywhere in space. Bam, right there. That's a point. How do I show the point? I just draw a little circle just to show where that point is. But the point itself doesn't have any width, doesn't have any thickness. You can't measure it or anything like that, okay? So this dot just tells me where the point is located. Again, very subtle differences in what I'm saying, but we need to describe this point. So we always use a capital letter. This is the first time we do this. We're going to do a whole bunch of these kind of things, but this is a capital letter, and it's just, and we use P. It doesn't have to be P. I could have called it point A, could have called it point Q, Z, B, F. It doesn't matter, all right? P for point kind of makes sense, doesn't it? So that would be point P. And that's how we say it. We say, I'll put little quotes right here, point P. All right? That's how we say it. This is what it looks like, though. Now, if I was going to write it, if I looked at something and I was like, what is the name of that point? Well, it's point P, but we don't have to actually put the little circle. We just put the letter P. So anytime in geometry, when you just see a capital letter by itself with nothing in front of it, that automatically means that it's a point. Everybody hear that? That was really important what I just said right there. Anytime in geometry, when you just see a capital letter by itself, that means it's a point. So I don't have to write the word point. I don't have to write the little circle, the little dot. If I just put the letter P or Q or A or Z or S, it means it's a point. Okay? Zanai, do you have a question? No, right. It doesn't have to be P. We just use P a lot for a point because starts with, point starts with P. But you could put anything. If I just randomly just stuck an A, capital A, right there, what does that mean? It's point A. So if I just wrote a capital A, that in geometry, that means it's point A, right? You can use any letter of the alphabet, all right? Doesn't matter. Everybody good so far? Yeah, that's easy. But we're going to be using that all through the rest of the year, really. Okay, we use points all the time in every single chapter, almost every single lesson probably is my guess. All right, so we got a second one. We got 3 altogether, 3 undefined terms. So on the quiz, 1/3 of your answer is going to be point, okay? Because I'm going to say list the 3 undefined terms. I'm telling you right now that's going to be on a quiz and it'll be on the test, all right? I'm not always going to tell you every little thing that's going to be on there, but that's the one thing that you got to know. I still had kids getting that wrong. And I told them like the day before, number 1 is going to be list the 3 undefined terms. And the kids are, what are the 3 point and then whatever the other 2 are. All right. I don't want to ruin the fun for you. Let's go one by one here. All right. So we start off with a point. The second one is a line. All right. And again, these are words you're familiar with. You're familiar with the word point. You're familiar with the word line. And the next thing you're familiar with as well. But this is a straight set of points. Again, it's not a definition. It's just a description. A straight set of points extending, which means it keeps on going, and extending infinitely. Somebody tell me what that means, infinitely. It doesn't end. That's right, infinitely. Did I spell that right? I think I did. In one dimension. You're like, Mr. Hammer, this sure looks like a definition. But it's technically not a definition. It's just a description of what it is. In one, what? I say dimension? In one dimension with no width or thickness. With no width or thickness. Thickness. There we go. Now, of course, it's not going to have any width or thickness. Why? Because the line is made up of a bunch of what? A bunch of points, right? And does a point have any thickness or any width? No, it doesn't. So a line's not going to either. I bet you, well, I don't know. I'm not going to say I bet you anything. But if I asked you to draw a line, all right, how do you think you would draw it? Is that a line? Well, there you go. Why would you have arrows at the end? That's right, because that word infinitely keeps going in both dimensions or in both directions. This one dimension means, like, if my line was on this board right here, that line would just stay on that board or stay on that. We're going to talk about this in a minute. A plane, all right, that keeps on going. So it doesn't just go in one direction. This doesn't say direction. It says dimensions. So if I put an arrow there, that means it keeps on going forever that way. And if I stick an arrow right there, what does that mean? Keeps on going that way, okay? So this is a description of a line. Again, it's not a definition. It's just a description. Everybody good? There's a couple ways we can name the line. Remember, we named a point. How did we name a point? With a capital letter. Right, with a capital letter, okay? There's a couple ways that we can name a line. Actually, more than a couple ways. You could use a lowercase letter. We'll put a little L for line. Is that all right? That's kind of like a cursive L for me, all right? You guys know cursive, right? So it's just a little L. And if you put it, you can put it anywhere, but usually they put it like near one of the arrows, right? I could have put the L right here. I could have put it out in front. Normally we would not put it in the middle like this. It probably wouldn't be wrong, but we normally don't do that. We usually put it either at one arrow or the other, okay? So any lowercase letter, I could have named this lowercase a, lowercase b, lowercase z, doesn't make any difference. So I could just call this line L, and that's how we would say this. We would say, I'm going to put it in quotes because this is how we would say it. We would say line L, okay? Sometimes we use that, but most of the time, I guess most of the time. What we would do is use 2 points that are on the line. Now, how many points are on this line? 1,000,000? Is that what you said? An infinite number. That's right. An infinite number of points. Exactly right. There's an infinite number of points on this because the line doesn't have any thickness, right? So it's not like you could like fill that line up with so many points where you can't put any more in there because it doesn't have any width. It doesn't have any thickness, all right? But we can just point out where 2 of the points are. So let's say we're going to talk about the point that lies right there on the line, and we're going to talk about the point that lies right there on the line, okay? Now, how do we describe a point? Using a what? Just said it. Capital letter. What letters do you want to use? Give me 2 letters.
Q.
Q, and what else? What did you say? V? Z? Okay, Q and Z. All right, there you go. That's my capital Z with that little thing through it. That's how I do capitals. So there's capital Q, there's capital Z. So those are 2 points on the line. Are they the only 2 points on the line? No, they're the only 2 points that I've actually designated, right? They're the only 2 points. There's more than 26 points on that line, right? But I only got 26 letters to choose from. But those are the only 2 that I've actually pointed out that are on the line. You won't. You're not going to put that many on there. They're not ever going to do that. You could go to Greek letters, and we will do some Greek letters a little bit later on. There's one Greek letter you probably have talked about, March 14th. What Greek letter is that? Pi. That's right, 3.14, right? So pi is actually a Greek letter of the alphabet. Did you know that? Maybe? No, you didn't know that? Well, we're going to talk a lot about pi later on, okay? Not quite yet. So, I don't usually organize that. Get Mrs. Larson or somebody. Maybe the new math teacher likes to do that kind of stuff. I don't know. I'm kind of boring and not that exciting. But who knows? Maybe we will. So here's 2 points on that line. So here's how we would describe that line, or here's how we would write the line. We use the 2 points that are on there. Is L a point on the line? No, because it's a lowercase letter, right? Only capital letters can be points. So here's another way. We could just call it line L and that's it. Or we could use 2 points, only 2 points on the line that we know, right, and use that. So I'm going to put the Q and the Z next to each other. And then I'm not going to just leave it like that. I'm going to put a little line symbol with arrows on both ends. Everybody see that? So I put the 2 points next to each other with an arrow on top. That tells me, when I see this, right, if I just see a piece of paper and somebody put QZ with an arrow thing on top of it like that, I automatically know what that means. That means, what do you think? Line, what? QZ. That's right. So I could call this line QZ. I could go the other way. I don't have to start at Q. Just because Q's on the left doesn't make any difference. Okay, it doesn't matter what order I put those points in. So what else could I call this if it doesn't matter what order I put the points? ZQ, right. I could call it line ZQ, but make sure, don't just leave it like that, because that means something different. I don't think we're going to talk about that today, but another day, ZQ by itself like that means something a little bit different than just line ZQ, all right? But I got to put the little line thing, and don't just leave it like this. What do you got to put on the ends? Right, put the arrows. Because if I didn't put the arrows on it, it means something else. Again, I don't think today, no, we're not going to talk about that today. But there'll be another day where we talk about it where we don't put the arrows on it. It means something a little bit different, okay? But these 2 things right here, line QZ, or this would be what? Line ZQ, they're the exact same line. It's the exact same line. It's not any different. It's just 2 different ways to describe the line. That's all it is. How are we on that? Everybody good? Yeah. Sometimes it gets a little weird, especially when you think of how in the world can you make a line? How can you put a whole bunch of points next to each other if they don't even have any thickness or they don't even have any width? You know, how can you do that? How could they be up against each other? You know, tell you the truth, I don't know. But this is how we do this, all right? Sometimes we can think way too much about this stuff. All right, one more. The third undefined, I don't think we're going to get this whole lesson done today. The third undefined term is a plane. And it's not an airplane, right? It's not a plane that flies in the sky. A plane is basically just a flat surface. So this wall right here, or this whiteboard right here, would be considered in a plane. All right. Let me just write down a little description. Again, these aren't definitions. They look like definitions, but they're really not definitions technically. So it's just a description. So a plane is a flat surface made of points. Extending infinitely. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? Extending, let me drop down here, infinitely. Oops, if I could write correctly. Oh, my goodness, my writing is terrible. I was going to say it'll probably get better as I get more used to doing this, but it really doesn't. My writing on this tablet's kind of hard. In 2 dimensions, so this time it's in 2 dimensions. The line was what? In 1 dimension. So this is in 2 dimensions. With no thickness. With no thickness. All right, and here's how we draw this in geometry most of the time, okay? You could draw it like that, but really, they usually slant it a little bit. Now I got to remember where my slant thing is. Is it right there? Yeah. So let's just slant it like 30 degrees. There we go. That right there is usually how they draw a plane on a piece of paper, okay? So that's how they usually draw it. Now, this looks like it has edges, doesn't it? But technically, this is made up of a bunch of lines. So really, does it like end right here? No, it just keeps on going. But there's no way I could draw something that kept on going forever and ever. Is there on a piece of paper? No. So we gotta compromise a little bit. So we draw it like this, and we just know if this is a plane, it keeps on going forever. Like for instance, the ceiling. The ceiling represents a plane, but the ceiling stops right there, but the plane that it's in doesn't stop right there. The plane would keep on going forever and ever and ever in all directions. You follow me on that? Same thing with the floor, the wall. The wall stops there at the floor, but the plane that the wall contains keeps on going forever, and it keeps on going forever that way, that way, that way. All right, so a plane keeps on going forever and ever. Obviously, we can't draw that on our paper like that, so this is how we draw it. There's a couple ways to name the plane. We could use a lowercase letter and put it in one of the corners, and it doesn't make any difference what corner. Let's just use the letter M. I'll put a little squiggle there to show it's lowercase. Yes? It does. It's got to be inside. It's got to be in one of the corners, but it doesn't matter which corner. Okay, it could be in that one, that one, that one, that one, but you don't want to put it on the outside. It's got to be inside of this. Nah, that would just be some random letter floating around somewhere. All right, so this right here is, we could call this plane M. So I'm going to put it in quotes again because we could call this plane M. All right, so that if that's all you saw that 4-sided figure like this, and you saw a little lowercase letter in one of the corners, that's the name of the plane. Okay. Now a plane has to contain at least 3 points. Okay, you have to have at least 3 points to make up a plane. So let's put some points. Put a point here, put a point here, put a point right there. There's 3 points. Let's label them. I'm just using what I used in my notes, F, G, and H. Okay? So if you have 3 points labeled inside of that plane, you could name it by those 3 points. So let's say they didn't give you that little lowercase m right there. This is all they gave you. And I asked you to name the plane. All right? Name the plane. It's got a name. What you're going to do is just use all 3 of those letters in any order. It doesn't matter what order you put them in. Okay? It doesn't have to be in alphabetical order. Doesn't have to be from left to right, up and down. It doesn't make any difference at all. All right? No, these are points. So points are always what? Uppercase, okay? So we're going to call this plane. And you could have several different ways to say this. You know what the quotation things are? This is what we say. That's why I put them in quotes. So this is how we would name this. This is what we would say. We would call it plane, let's go FGH. Is that the only way that I could call it FGH? No, I could call it what else? GFH, I could call it GHF, I could call it F or HFG, right? There's a bunch of different ways I could call it. I just decided to use FG and H. It doesn't make any difference. So like when you do a homework assignment, they're going to ask you to like name certain things, right? And if you can name it with like 2 letters or 3 letters, and if it like a line, doesn't matter what order you put them in. If you wrote line AB, but I'm up in front of you and I'm reading out the answers and I say line BA, you have to know that, oh, I wrote AB, he said BA, it's the same thing. You follow me on that? All right, same thing with this. If they ask you to name this plane and you wrote FHG, and I said as an answer, I'm up here with the answers, I'm okay, here's number 5. Number 5 is plane FGH. But if you wrote FHG, you got to look at it, you got to be able to know, oh yeah, it's the same thing. It's just a different order. Does that make sense? Because I can't, on every one of these, go through every single possibility. It would just take forever to do. So you have to understand if you got it right or not. Make sense? Yes, ma'am.
When you're naming points and lines, does it only have to be one letter or can it be multiple?
Well, with a line, you could do it 2 ways. One with one lowercase letter or 2 uppercase letters. But you're never going to use 3, and you can't just use 1 point to name a line. Because look, if I had a point here, that line could go this way, it could go this way, it could go this way, right? And so you can't just use 1 point. But if I had 2, if I had a point here and a point here, there's only one line that can go through those 2 points, okay? So you got to use 2. In this case, we use 3 for a plane. All right, everybody good? When did I say this is over? 1:28, and it's about time. There's no way I can do any more. I'll tell you what, so no homework tonight, so you got off lucky. I'll tell you what I'll do though. If you want, there's not much you could probably do, but I'll tell you what the homework is. All right, so it's section 1-2. Now, here's something I always want on your homework assignment. Put your name, then put the section number. Now, if you want to put the pages on your homework, you can, but I really look for the section number. If you don't have the section number, then I'm going to take a point off. All right, I know it's picky. Now, you won't be able to do all of these, but you might be able to do the first couple of them, all right, if you want to get a little head start. But that's what it's going to be. So I'll finish it up tomorrow. We should be able to finish it up tomorrow. I just got just 1 page, bunch of definitions. So now we're actually going to get to definitions. We only did the undefined terms today. The definitions will go a little bit faster, and we'll start right off at the beginning of class tomorrow, and then we'll have a full class. Today was Wednesday. It's a short day today, short periods today, so there you go. Everybody good? All right, you can go. The bells really aren't ringing, so go ahead and go.